Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb, and today I am absolutely delighted to be one that I feel feels like it's been long in the making. This is Chris Lees from FixSpec. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Long in the making because I think we were talking the other day when we caught up about maybe 12 years ago when you were first starting up the business, and we were sat outside Trade Tech, I think it was, chatting about the business. We were both outside at that sort of stage, waiting in the pub for everyone to come out.
Yeah.
I think. And obviously, I've been seeing what you've done and where the business has gone over the last 10, 12 years or so, and it's been a great story to look at. And we've been talking about this for a long time about getting you onto it and having a conversation. So I'm thrilled to finally get you on the show. Sorry it's taken so long as it has so far, but all good things come to those who wait, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So Chris, kick off by telling us a little bit about yourself and FixSpec.
Sure. So my background has always been in product management in and around electronic trading.
Yeah.
So I've worked for exchanges, I've worked for banks, I've worked for trading system vendors. And I was always the guy who came up with the new order type or the way that the order book worked or something like that. And I was facing off against the developer team. And there was always one thing that I found again and again and again throughout that whole experience, which was you come up with a new idea, explain it to your sales guys, they go and sell it out to customers, and then the customer says, brilliant, please can I connect? Somebody then says, well, send them the FixSpec. Mm-hmm. Some 200-page PDF document gets emailed to somebody, and then it just disappears into this big black hole for we don't know how long, right? Because it just ends up in some development queue somewhere.
Yeah.
Eventually, it may or may not turn out the other side, but you actually, as a venue, you don't actually have a huge amount of control over when it pops out, how much of it they've written to, or whether there's any problems along the way. And that's really the problem that we're trying to solve with FixSpec, is we don't understand why it takes so long for firms to connect in financial services. Now that could be pension funds talking to banks, it could be software vendors connecting to exchanges. It doesn't really matter what type of connectivity is. It is just the fact that it takes too long, and we want to try to solve that. We want to make it faster and easier for people to connect.
Which seems like a good way of a good problem to be solving, right?
Well, I mean, there's connectivity everywhere,
yeah.
Right? You know, I often tell people that in financial services, for some reason, we don't think of ourselves as API businesses. We think of ourselves as trading businesses or exchanges or something like that. The reality is almost all business into an exchange, into a broker, into a software vendor comes through an API and leaves through an API as well, right? We are all API businesses. The fact that we don't seem to put the right resources and time into making our APIs good and fast to connect to is a shame. It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And that opportunity sort of comes into the fact that there is a lot of potential in that space to make things better, to improve it. I know, we caught up the other day, and one of the things that I think was clearly on your mind was a sort of frustration about the industry, which I think is not unique. And I think it's really interesting. Just rewinding a second, when you talk about being a product manager, I think there are so many founders at the moment who come from that product management background. I've said it on the show before. I find it really interesting to see one of the biggest growth areas of people founding businesses is from product management backgrounds.
Right.
And I think why that happens is because you're looking at things and looking at problems and becoming obsessed with the problem, which is a great founder's mindset, isn't it? Right. How do I solve that problem? How do I go out there and build it? Yeah. And in the end, they sort of say, right, I've got the idea, I know the problem, I'm going to go out there and build it. And we're going to come on to a little bit at the moment about your sort of innovator's dilemma, so to speak, your constant thought process about improvement and where it can go, which I think is fascinating. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But when you've got a product background in some of the businesses you're coming from, I think you look at things and say, right, this can be done better. And I think this is an industry there which has got ambition to want to do things better and embraces ideas of new technology, but takes a long time for that new technology and ideas to come back into it. Yeah. So let's take cloud for example. The pandemic, in my opinion, was what really catapulted cloud into the financial services when it had done 10 years worth of good elsewhere across other industries. Right. And it was still in spite of, not because of the benefits of cloud. It was because of we need to think differently about this, and the pandemic allowed that to happen. just before you came in, I saw a headline come up on my feed talking about how last week's cyber attack, or not, cyber issues, were a testament to the problems that we have with the cloud, which I think is completely off kilter in terms of where we're going. But anyway, let's not go down a side avenue with that. But what I think is interesting is again, as I speak about quite a lot, the rest of other industries are very, very good at looking at technology and looking at opportunities and innovating and removing friction, becoming better, becoming quicker, and making it a better world. Our space, because it is highly regulated, because it is very traditional and conservative, and because of the risk involved in it, all valid reasons, I think falls behind in innovation in things there that could actually make all of those things better at the same sort of time. And I know it's an area of frustration to you that this industry misses out on innovation within it. So give us your sort of two pennies worth.
You're absolutely right, and for all the good reasons that you've specified in terms of regulation and things like that, the sheer size of some of these firms, the internal bureaucracy and procedures that they need to have, largely because of regulation, but also for good management decisions, mean that people seem to move at a snail's pace.
And risk as well. I think there's the other side. Personal risk, career risk.
Right.
I think sometimes people are in that. You would like it to be that senior people are seen as visionaries and can make change in an organisation, are there to shake things up.
Yeah.
I think the higher you get up in some of those financial institutions, the more at risk you are, so the more play it safe you get to. Go back to the whole no one ever got fired for hiring IBM sort of concept, which I think stifles it sometimes. And when people can change their relationship with that, I think it can really fuel a lot more innovation in the space as well.
Yeah, there's also a lot of very practical situations about the fact that this is a brownfield site. Almost every single firm is a brownfield site. They've got fixed connections all over the place. It's a bit of a spaghetti mess, and the thought of unpicking any of that or doing anything slightly differently is a big project, and we know that not everybody has the resources available to do that. And we can't stop the world, can't stop all business while we sort out this technical debt. We have to keep the two running in parallel. But if we kind of put that to one side for a minute, just zoom out to sort of the way that technology has changed in the years, we've got to remember that the FIX protocol predates the internet, which is just an astonishing fact when you think about it, right? Hats off to the guys who came up with this back in the, in the 80s.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane to think about. And
I'm just trying to. What I'm just looking at is I know they're celebrating 30 years of FIX this year, isn't it?
The FIX protocol.
Yeah.
Community. The organisation.
Yeah, of course.
That's right. But the protocol was around a little bit before that.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. It was an amazing visionary thing, and of course, everybody who's been involved in the FIX trading community over the years has massively contributed to that. Now it's this wonderful, very rich dictionary that we have from the FIX protocol. But I also can't get away from the fact that for 30 plus years, we're still doing things in exactly the same way that we were. There's still the classic version of FIX, and that's still the one that everybody uses today, mostly. And we're still shuffling these PDF documents around, okay? If you think about other environments, you think about the REST API world, which is the most common type of API there is out there, certainly much younger than FIX, but is now ubiquitous, absolutely everywhere. There's an awful lot of technology that allows people to go straight from a digital specification, so a description of what the API actually does, to immediately auto-generate code to connect against that API. To immediately generate test cases to test that API. These sorts of innovations are things that FIX has completely missed to date, and there's a large reason for that, which comes down to the fact that we are hooked on PDFs. And sometimes I feel like a broken record as I tell people about this, but while
it's like the data world saying everyone's hooked on Excel, isn't it?
It's while we are hooked on PDFs, there's no way that any machine can really do anything about that. A PDF is designed for humans to actually read. What we need to be able to unlock all of these wonderful innovation tools like auto code generation is a digitized version of a specification. It's actually the reason why I called the company FixSpec. I write it with a small I and an X. It's fix the verb, not fix the protocol.
Okay.
And it's all about trying to fix your spec. is trying to get rid of PDF.
The amount of times I've seen that name over the last 12 years and not put that together. I love the origins of it.
The play on words. It helps with Google search optimization, of course. But the idea is if you move away from the PDF and you move to something that's far more machine readable, you can suddenly unlock all of these new tools that allow you to do things far more efficiently than they were before. And it's not just REST that's done this. There's things like protocol buffers, which is now very widespread everywhere else. It's a binary format, much faster, much more effective and efficient than Fix is. All of that can be auto-generated as well. And that really is the source of my frustration, is that as an industry, we are missing out on those technical innovations that are happening elsewhere. And my fear is that we're just being left behind unless we start to embrace those new technologies. So
how do we get people to embrace those new technologies? So you spent the last 12 years knocking on doors and encouraging people to the virtues of how you can help within that sort of space. But I get where you're coming from, and whilst I do think we've seen some sort of real stunning innovations come into the arena. And there is an opportunity to do something completely revolutionary at the moment with this collision, this perfect storm of everything through from blockchain technology through to AI through to cloud. Still stuff we can do in cloud in the space. There's this wonderful cluster of potential, and yet there's this conservatism and skepticism that sort of sits behind it from traditional finance and background. However, you've also got this sort of leaning in piece where everything is becoming more expensive. So cost reduction is critical within the sector. Friction reduction of process is becoming more and more to give trading advantage, which increases productivity. And I think the biggest opportunity across the whole sector, and in fact most of business full stop in the UK, is to solve that global productivity crisis that you read about in the papers every single day. So I think there's only so much cost reduction you can keep on doing with inflation and everything else that comes into it, where your margin has to be about increasing productivity and increasing the performance per head. And I think this is something there which, with the right embracing of all that sort of stuff, is what something which you're talking about being able to fix.
So I read an interesting article just yesterday about, it was comparing REST, which is one type of protocol, with something else called gRPC. And it was specific about the particular platform that they were selling, but they estimated how long it would take to connect to a REST API, how long it would take to connect to a gRPC API. The answer was 10 minutes and 45 minutes. In Fix, we will be measuring it in months. Okay, and that for me is exactly the point here, which is there is a problem with productivity and the way that we are making connections between financial services institutions that's just deeply ineffective as it is today, right? If we were moving to new technologies, then we would be able to connect much faster, which means that we can do more with far fewer developers. We don't need the QA resources to actually to focus on doing quite so much manual testing against these things. We don't need the conformance tools to actually do these things because a lot of the code has been auto-generated in the first place. We can have a much better outcome, a quality outcome with far fewer resources, and we can just accelerate the business. I mean, that's even before we talk about the fact that something like a protobuf message is significantly smaller than a fixed message, and therefore your AWS data fees are going to drop dramatically.
So what happens to do that? How do you overcome that impasse that you're seeing in the space at the moment? Why don't people take that sort of obvious leap?
That is the $1 billion question that I wish I knew the answer to.
Are you seeing people lean into it right now? People recognise that sort of opportunity, or are they just are they inhibited by the sort of power of the tribe?
I am seeing it, and I'm not seeing it, and I think the subtlety is that internally people are using a lot of these concepts. So we've all heard a lot about the debate between monolithic structures versus microservices. That's a development pattern that's been evolving for a really long time. The APIs between microservices tend to be gRPC, protobuf, these types of messages. We've all been using message buses internally for a long time. I apologise for going into the technical weeds here, but my point is,
you know my limitations too well.
Internally, a lot of developers are actually using the right sort of techniques. The minute we stop talking about internal communication and we start talking about external communication with two different parties, suddenly we all revert back to it's fix. And that, I think, is the thing that really needs to change. Now, don't get me wrong, there are chicken and egg problems here. Of course there are chicken and egg problems, because on each side of a Fix API, there are two people, right?
Yeah.
There's one person over here and one person over here, and you both need to understand that new API in order to be able to communicate effectively. That's one of the great things that Fix gives us, is a common dictionary for everybody to use, right?
Yeah.
And so doing things like that, converting a whole industry over, what we need to do is we need to be able to find mechanisms that show people, or rather give them options that say, if you do it this way, then the end result will be faster, cheaper, more performant. If you can't do it that way, then that's fine. You can drop back to Fix as, let's say, a legacy structure in the interim. But as soon as both parties are ready, let's turn it on to high speed and make the connection much faster. Also, people internally today who are using Fix perhaps as their internal mechanism protocol should be just converting themselves and making their own internal operations significantly faster.
When we look at I mean, you termed, before we came on air, you termed it sort of, it's not the sexy stuff, right? It's the plumbing. But the plumbing are the things there that can make everything flow, literally, easier and better and faster and everything in between, right? So when I think institutions are looking at investment at the moment, they're looking for those headline-grabbing words, buzzwords at the moment, and is some of this plumbing always at the top of the list for that sort of stuff, or should it be? Are questions there that probably get overlooked at various different stages because everyone wants to have that foot race because everyone's talking about AI or whatever it might be as the flavour of the month for that particular year. How do you change that conversation? How do you make plumbing sexy without a calendar?
That's a great idea. Maybe we should put a FixSpec calendar up. I don't know is the honest answer.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I think a lot of the innovations I've talked about here in terms of you move directly from a machine readable specification directly to auto-generated code.
Yeah.
That feels AI-like.
Yeah.
When you first see it in action,
Yeah.
it feels, wow, hang on, all this code's just suddenly been written for me and I don't even really need to look at it because I know that it's done correctly.
Yeah.
That feels AI-like, even though it isn't AI.
Yeah.
Or at least it's AI actual intelligence, not artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Which
is no bad thing.
And so if we somehow get people to understand, look, the thing that you should be going for with all of these investments is actually process improvement, automation, higher quality outputs for the same level of input. That's where they should be putting their investment, not just putting ChatGPT onto some FixSpec. I mean,
to again be really approximately right in terms of what happens. Yeah, right. I think that performance is such an important part of it, isn't it? And to me, that's where the sexiness comes into it. Is about building something there where people can look at it and say this will improve performance. I know it sounds really obvious, but I think sometimes, particularly in tech, you have a lot of jargon that goes out in the presentation to a particular individual. And it gets lost in the reeds a little bit. And I think that sort of clear message. I was speaking to a founder the other day who's hiring a CMO, and his frustration with the current setup of their marketing thing is it does some really good stuff. It's good thought leadership. It's good content it puts out, but their messaging doesn't necessarily say exactly what they did. The Ron Seal, exactly what it says on the tin, sort of stuff. And I think that sort of real focus on performance and saying this is which is the bit which people want to hear about, isn't it? How does any investment increase our performance? And that, whilst it sounds absolutely obvious, it's a very difficult thing to articulate sometimes, isn't it?
Right. And I think performance it's not just about the speed of the order, because when we talk about things like Fix APIs, we all talk about, I've got to get my order in there really quickly, and then people start veering off into the weeds of saying, it should be a binary API as opposed to Fix in the first place. That when I'm saying performance, I'm actually talking about a couple of different things. There is a technical performance, which is messages being smaller, going faster on the wire. That's true. But the performance I'm really talking about is resource performance. Okay, Fix's because of the way that it's grown up, is quite a niche skill. It commands a premium. You'll know this, right? There's a limited set of people who really understand Fix.
Yeah.
If you look at other protocols like gRPC, about REST, WebSocket, things like that, loads of developers can do that straight out of university, because that's what they're now being taught in university.
Yeah.
And so there's a real resource performance gain to be achieved simply by thinking about using other tools in the toolkit.
Yeah.
I want to be quite clear that I'm not predicting the end of Fix instantly, right? And I'm not trying to kill off Fix at all.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is there's a larger toolkit. People keep reaching for the Fix hammer every single time, and I think that's probably wrong. If people were to think a bit more carefully about exactly which protocols they should be using for which particular job, you may well end up with a much better outcome.
Yeah, I think that's really important to say, isn't it? Because look, there's as you say, Fix. That stunned me actually. That Fix being around before the internet, but actually looking at it and saying, right, there's clearly a part for it to play in the process, and this is about augmentation and how you can utilise the best part of it and use the best of its capabilities, or whatever, whichever way you want to term it, alongside other areas to make sure we're driving efficiency through the industry.
Yeah,
which makes it an interesting spot to be in.
And I can give very concrete examples of that. Nobody really believes that Fix is well optimized for broadcast market data.
Yeah.
That's been known for quite a long time. There are some improvements. There's Fix Fast, there's Fix SBE, blah blah blah. But realistically, it's not well optimized for that. That's why all exchanges have gone to these binary protocols. And so Fix isn't the tool you should reach for in that particular case.
Yeah.
There's other use cases such as downloading lists of instruments each day. Fix isn't really the right tool for that either.
Yeah.
Something like a REST interface is significantly better for doing that, or even just an SFTP download. So, but for things like Fix order entry, absolutely, why not? Because it's the right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
So it's just being a bit more selective about exactly what you're using and what your use case is to select the right tool for the job.
So going back to this plumbing analogy, it's about having that toolbox, the plumber's toolbox there, and utilising the right thing at the right time.
Hammer for January, wrench for February.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got it.
We know where we're heading. We've got it. We've solved it all. Speaking about sort of change and thinking about things differently and all this sort of stuff. There's some really interesting things that you're doing as a business at the moment. And you termed it sort of going dark for a little while. And I think this is a fascinating sort of thing. It probably comes back again to that whole product manager's mindset.
Right.
Going in there and thinking differently about how you run the business. Now, I think this is incredible for a business at 12 years old to be doing. And I think it's both brave but also massively forward thinking. So I'm going to let you talk about it in a minute, but to go there and go dark and think, right, let's walk the talk on this sort of innovators play and think about how we can go back into this and really rethink the business, rethink the model, and think about how we can go further forward and not necessarily keep going out there and doing the same sort of thing. I think is I'll rewind slightly. Going back to the pandemic, I think when we were talking to businesses pre-pandemic, there was a dirty word in technology, and that dirty word in technology was pivot. And everyone said, right, if you're pivoting, you go here, and there was no strategy behind it, and people didn't like it. All of a sudden, the pandemic showed us that business models could be changed very quickly based on the marketplaces out of it, and you saw some businesses go from here to there very, very quickly because they looked at different problems in a different way and took advantage of the marketplace and what the marketplace needed. And I think actually now, if you think about continuous improvement and Kaizen and all of these different sort of areas, it's about making sure you're adapting and thinking and evolving as a business. You're doing it in a pretty dramatic way to say, right, let's batten down the hatches for a little bit and really think about what the market needs. And we were talking about this when we met up the other week. And I could see the sort of cogs turning and the excitement happening and this sort of almost reinvention sort of a piece coming on about what can happen in the marketplace. So it's a long-winded way of teeing you up to say, tell us what's happening in your world at the moment.
So I'm not gonna go into too much detail about what we're looking to do, but on the point of innovation and why we've reached this point in our life cycle, I do want to kind of touch on that because it is kind of interesting. As you said, we've been going for 12 years. I started out with this idea of small f, small I, small x, fix your spec.
Yeah.
And quite quickly we ended up having to have a use case for that in order to be able to build our business. And our use case that we were going into was mostly conformance. The idea of I have to write to your API and somebody needs to conform and validate that that thing is true. And that's really what has been our bread and butter of this business. We're not backing away from that. We're not turning that off in any way, shape, or form. We are going to continue with that because there's still a need for that. There is, however, a recognition from me and from my team that the world has moved on in 12 years, right? There is new technology out there. There's new ways of doing things, and the way that development is done within our customers and prospects is different. 12 years ago, nobody really wanted to talk to us about the cloud. Certainly things like Kubernetes didn't exist. Nobody knew what that was. Nobody really understood what a Docker container was. Nobody talked about CI/CD pipelines. Nowadays, that's all people want to talk about, right? That is everything. And so not only do our existing product set need to move forward, but we also think that there's a change in the way that people are thinking about APIs generally, or there's a change that people need to start thinking about APIs per our previous conversation.
Yeah.
We're actually seeing a proliferation of APIs. So if you look at, for example, crypto exchanges, most crypto exchanges are born with REST and WebSocket as APIs.
Yeah.
And then they later on add in either Fix or binary, one of those two.
Yeah.
The traditional exchanges have always been Fix plus binary. We actually think that there's going to be this new model of lots of different APIs for any given venue, and perhaps almost a choose which one you want type.
Predominantly through this digital assets as an asset class, or across the industry.
I think it's the accelerant, right? I think that you might see traditional firms look and feel a little bit more crypto-ish, right? Because they're seeing that that's what they're doing.
Look and feel a little bit more institutional as well.
And so you'll end up with probably a whole variety of different APIs.
Yeah.
Some of those APIs are clearly easier for modern developers to connect to than older APIs. And so it'll be interesting to see how that whole thing pans out. And so it's kind of with this background of things have changed from a development perspective. Things have changed from a customer requirement perspective in terms of more APIs and different types of APIs. This caused us to go back and think about, well, what is it that we're actually doing here? Is it just conformance? Is there something else? Is there a missing tool, product, service that we could or should be offering to people to help them navigate this new landscape? And that's what we're interested in.
And that's where you're going for. And so what prompt, I mean, look, lots of people have those sort of thoughts, and lots of people are doing things, and lots of people will sort of be doing it, for want of a better expression, as the kids call it these days, as a sort of side hustle to whilst they continue to do things. I think this is a fascinating thing for you to say, right, let's just really stop, pause, think, spend time on it. And I bet you it turns out brilliantly for you off the back of it as well. But it's such a different sort of thing, which I don't think I've had too many people who I've had on this show over the last however many years who've taken that sort of approach to it all. And it's not completely unique, is it? But it's not common.
I think it's an understanding that what it is that we're trying to build doesn't exist today. Nobody's, to my knowledge, ever tried it.
Which has got you excited.
Which has got me super excited, super jazzed about the whole idea. And that requires an amount of very deep thinking and research and development into exactly how we're going to do it. It's not, well, we think we have the broad strokes of how we're going to do it. We don't know whether it's even possible. And so we have to spend that time, that quality thinking time to get into it. And that's why we're saying, we'll of course support all of our existing software, and that will continue to go forward. But our focus is going to be on this from an innovation perspective.
I think in a sort of very positive sort of way, I could sense the sort of frustration when we met, a month or so ago, whenever it was. And I think to see, there's obviously been a holiday, hence your tan shaming me at the moment that's gone into it. But to see the energy come back into being excited about something, I think that says a lot about it as well, doesn't it? And this is what this industry should be about energy, excitement, passion to solve problems, passion to do things. And look, I've spoken to people about you over the years, and I think there's a lot of respect, whether you make your head big here, but a lot of respect about the way that you think around issues and the problems in the marketplace and all that sort of thing. And I think this is a really classic example of going into that and doing something pretty extraordinary. So I'm looking forward to hearing what happens and what it looks like. And as we said beforehand, I want the exclusive when we
okay,
when we go live, to hear more about it, because I think this is such a brilliant way of doing things, to actually go on that journey with you and to showcase with people what that can look like and how it happens and what it means. And actually that process, I think it will be a stunning show to go back to it and say, right, over the last few months, this is what we've been doing. This is why we went dark, so to speak, and spent that time doing the deep R&D and deep thinking, which I think is a really important point in all this as well. But I think it's fascinating. I'm really excited for you.
I'm super excited. I can't wait.
So, Chris, look, there'll be people who are watching this who have had their interest piqued on this, who want to go into more detail, who probably want to get a little bit of intel about what might be happening. I'm sure you won't tell them for a couple of months at the same sort of stage. But for people who recognise this sort of thing, for people who are frustrated about the lack of innovation in the space, for people who just want to reach out and get in touch, what's the best way of them getting in touch with you?
So obviously LinkedIn, you could just send me an email, chris@fixspec.com. It's kind of easy to guess. Always happy to have open chats with people about the problems that they're facing, and particularly this piece about how they move from where they are today to something different in the future. Those open-ended chats are always the ones that I get the most out of, and I think that they get the most out of them as well.
Definitely.
Get in touch.
Get in touch. Well, listen, absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for coming in.
Cheers.
Glad we got it in before this the dark mode, and really good to listen to the whole story. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on the next episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.